The Orris Project. Book 1, Origin and Earth, by David J. Salisbury. Episode 5. 5. Garrett lay in bed in his small one-bedroom apartment that night, shrouded in darkness. Sleep eluded him while he thought about what his life would look like were he to go through with the missions before him. Was his mother right about the 3 options for his end of life? Was there not a 4th or even a 5th option? Die on the ship, she said. She was right. The people who left for Orris would never reach it. In most cases, their offspring would not even reach the great intergalactic machine. It could be 3 or 4 generations, depending on the timing and how far Orris had traveled before they left. But how would dying on the ship be good for him? Why would he spend his last years in cramped quarters breathing recycled air just to die 20% or even 10% of the way through the total journey? So that they could lay my bones to rest on Orris? Maybe. Or should they put him in the soil of the last planet he visited? No more Sterilex stints. He could enjoy his elder years quietly and comfortably on his final mission planet. But that was not what he wanted. None of that. All his objectives accomplished, he wanted to make it back to Orris. He wanted to walk on the deck. He wanted to review the progress and learn the strategies and goals for escaping the eventual collapse. More than anything, he wanted to find out what had happened to the other envoys, what successes they had, or more pessimistically, what failures. He wanted to know how many mission planets sent populations to Orris. He wanted to know if the different populations assimilated completely, or if there remained factions of unique peoples. The most satisfying way he could grow old, the most appropriate way he could die, would be on Orris, among the results of all his and his counterparts' efforts. That would be the beautiful end to an amazing life, lived completely. 6. Garrett walked into the OPM building the next morning at 10:08 to report for his 10:30 appointment with the Migration Division Recruitment Board. Printed on the glass doors was, Orris Project Management Central Offices, Dinesta, Report of Cora. His nerves concerned him. He did not want to sound like he had hesitations in the meeting. He walked into the large reception area, which appeared to consume the entire front half of the first floor, and possibly the second and third floors. The exterior wall facing the street was all glass, and natural light filled the large space, constructed almost entirely of dark gray stone and bright chromed steel. The ceiling was 30 feet from the floor. At the reception desk was a smiling woman in her mid to late 40s, with dark blonde hair that fell to her shoulders and a name tag that read Cecilia pinned to the lapel of her jacket.
Good morning. How can I help you?
Cecilia asked. Her smile was sweet and did not look forced. She seemed to be in a genuinely good mood, and that helped put Garrett at ease.
Hi, I have a 10:30 appointment with the Migration Division.
Garrett placed the folder with the information packet and a variety of forms the recruitment team had given him when he verbally accepted their offer on the reception countertop.
Okay. Do you know who specifically the appointment was with?
Cecilia asked, while typing something into her computer, not looking at Garrett.
Yes, the recruitment board,
he said. She stopped typing and looked up at him over her reading glasses.
Oh, that's a high-profile meeting. What was your name?
Cecilia did not turn back to her computer.
Garrett Rhodes. That's Rhodes.
She turned back to the computer but only hit 2 keys on the keyboard.
Garrett Rhodes, 10:30 with the MD Recruitment Board. Got it right here?
She said and stood, pointing behind him.
Have a seat right over there in one of those chairs, Mr. Rhodes. I'll call you back up in a few minutes, and I'll need your ID card. We'll also do a quick biometric scan so we can skip the rest of the security protocols.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Her smile widened at the sound of her name, and she sat back down. Garrett walked over to the bank of 4 stuffed blue chairs occupied by no one and sat down. There was a large digital clock over Cecilia's head that read 10:16, and he wondered how long it would take to get from the reception area to the actual meeting place. To his relief, he heard her voice only moments later.
Mr. Rhodes?
He stood and walked back up to the reception desk, offering his ID card once he arrived. She took it.
Thank you,
she said, and keyed some information into the computer.
Mr. Rhodes, Do we have your permission to run a biometric scan of your person to verify your identity? If yes, place either thumb on the black pad here.
She pointed with one red painted nail to a cutout in the polished stone countertop, with what looked like a simple black plastic square about 2 inches by 2 inches in the slight depression. He placed his left thumb on the pad, thinking there was no way it was that easy to get into the building. When his thumb contacted the pad, a tiny red light in the upper right corner flashed quickly. He looked at it, and it changed to a steady green.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. The thumbprint is for permission only. Please stand up straight and still, and look at the blue dot of light over my left shoulder until I tell you to stop.
She gestured with her pen over her shoulder without looking. That was it. The actual test was about to begin. He could see nothing but the steady blue dot of light set in the blackened granite backdrop behind her, and about 12 inches beneath the raised metal letters reading Orris Project Management. Though subtle, he knew he was being scanned and measured in multiple ways to verify his identity, facial recognition being only a part of the extensive procedure. After only 10 seconds, the blue light blinked out and Cecilia said,
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes.
He chuckled.
That's it? No retina scan?
He was smiling and tried to come across as light-hearted. She smiled back and said,
We scanned your retinas when you placed your thumb on the pad.
Garrett was at first surprised, but thought of the light starting red, then turning green.
We take security seriously here, Mr. Rhodes.
Yes,
He said.
I would expect nothing less.
She handed him his ID card and a paper security clearance ticket with his credentials, building floor, meeting room number, and appointment time in large print.
Please take the elevator. Place your thumb on the pad next to the up arrow, and it will take you to the 21st floor. Your meeting room number is 2106. There will be someone outside the room to receive you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. You've been a tremendous help.
Garrett watched as a little color rose in her cheeks, and he turned to walk to the elevators. She surprised him when she called out after him, surprising because of the informality.
Garrett?
She called. He stopped and turned toward her.
I'm going to know your name for a long time, aren't I? Probably for the rest of my life.
She looked at him with what he perceived as a slight anxiety.
Maybe.
Was all he replied with a soft, small smile, and turned back to the elevators. 7. When the elevator doors closed, he looked anxiously at his watch. 10:24. Too close. Should have left earlier, he thought. Relieved, he found the elevator moved quickly and did not stop at any other floors. Another security measure, he surmised. Once the carriage stopped and the doors parted, it surprised him to find the entire board standing there, dressed in formal business attire. Before the doors even finished their opening procedure, the group of men and women applauded. Color did not just rise on his cheeks, his entire face surged into a full, embarrassed blush, which caused the group before him to laugh. Finally, Dr. Christine Page, the one who had offered him the position in the first place, stepped into the elevator and took his left hand, drawing him out.
We can't tell you how excited we all are that you accepted this role, Mr. Rhodes,
Dr. Page said. She led him out into the elevator bay so the door could close behind him. A short, overweight man with a balding head and a dark gray suit was next to speak.
This is amazing. So many years of work. And now we can finally put a face with the strategies and mission plans. I'm so happy to meet you, Mr. Rhodes. My name is Arthur.
Arthur had a much stronger grip than Garrett had expected, but he returned the firm handshake in kind.
My apologies for the informal reception, Mr. Rhodes. We should all move to the conference room,
Dr. Page said. She held her arms out from her sides in a herding gesture to the rest of the group. Garrett followed behind the herd, walking next to Dr. Page, a small woman in her 60s with blonde hair pulled back in a clip. She spoke to him as they walked, in a low voice so the others wouldn't hear her.
Are you nervous, Garrett?
He looked at her with his brow raised high as if to say, of course.
Don't be. These people are a wreck of nerves right now. I'm sure it will be different with future envoys. But right now, these folks don't even know what to do with themselves. I told them I was coming to greet you, and they all followed me.
When they reached the conference room, Garrett expected a large table yards long with 50 or 60 leather chairs. What he discovered when he walked into the room was a smallish round table with exactly 8 modest cloth-cushioned chairs around it. matching the number of attendees for the meeting. The room itself resembled more of an office than a large conference room. It had only 4 windows and a litter of random furniture besides the meeting table. He stood before it, waiting for each of the board members to select their seats. A tall, white-haired man in his late 50s or early 60s said,
"Grab a seat anywhere, Mr. Rhodes."
Garrett approached the closest of the chairs, pulled it out, and waited for the others to sit before sitting himself. Dr. Page flanked him on his left, and the man who had self-identified as Arthur to his right. But once seated, it was a white-haired man who started the meeting in an upbeat and exuberant tone.
"Well, Mr. Rhodes, we can't tell you how happy we all are to have this meeting with you. I can't explain how happy I am to have had our top candidate accept the role. We knew we could fill the roles, at least in the first group, but we didn't know how many of our top candidates would accept. So I want to thank you personally. As you can imagine, there are a lot of nerves and anxiety that go along with a project this complex, and you accepting is a huge win for us."
Garrett's face once again flushed to a bright red.
Alex?
Dr. Page interrupted.
Maybe you should tell Garrett who you are.
Whitehair only looked at Dr. Page for a second, then slapped his forehead comically.
"Of course, Mr. Rhodes, I apologize. I know you met Dr. Page and Dr. Abbott yesterday, but you have no way of knowing who I am."
Alex Whitehair laughed at himself for a moment.
"I'm Alex Murray, chairman of the Migration Division."
Garrett's stomach seemed to drop a few inches. He knew he would meet high-profile people at the meeting, but this did not diminish the impact of the actual encounter. What had that man accomplished in his life to land a job as important and complex as leading the Migration Division? He could not imagine.
"So, let's do all the introductions quickly,"
Dr. Murray continued, with every bit of the exuberance he had started with.
"Everyone already knows you, but let me do the honor of introducing you anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, sitting before you here is Garrett Rhodes. Garrett was our #1 candidate for the role of envoy. His academic background is exemplary on its own, but he is the only candidate, the only one, to score perfectly on his application exam. I can tell all of you honestly I could not have pulled that off. 400 questions, all extremely advanced."
Dr. Murray looked from person to person at the table.
"The only other qualifier was the DNA test, and his came back squeaky clean. Mr. Rhodes, you were made for this job."
That sparked a fresh round of applause, as though Garrett had controlled and shaped his own DNA.
"Christine?"
Dr. Murray sat down, and Dr. Page stood.
Dr. Christine Page, Garrett and I met yesterday. I am both a recruiter and the head of psychology for the Migration Division."
She smiled and sat. Dr. Murray gestured to the man sitting next to her. A short man with a dark complexion and curly jet-black hair stood.
Dr. Benjamin Estes, Survival Theory.
Estes sat quickly. Survival theory? Garrett thought about what that might mean with little success. Dr. Murray continued his gesturing, and a thin, youthful woman with red hair that was pulled back tightly against her skull stood up.
Dr. Lauren Astor, Acquisitions.
She, too, sat quickly and stared down at her hands. Garrett thought about what acquisitions might mean, and he thought he had an idea. She glanced back up at Garrett and blushed heavily when she discovered he was still looking at her. Dr. Murray skipped himself, as expected, and continued around the table. The next victim was a youngish man with light brown hair combed straight back and a sharp jawline. He stood up all the way and had a small smile on his face.
"Hello again, Mr. Rhodes. I'm Dr. Jack Abbott."
He looked out at the rest of the meeting attendees.
"Garrett and I also met yesterday. I am a recruiter along with Dr. Page, and I am the Director of Engineering and Technology for the Migration Division."
Dr. Abbott sat. Big job, Garrett thought. Dr. Murray smiled and gestured to the next board member, a large woman with long dark hair and a beautiful smile, probably in her mid-30s.
Dr. Olive Francis, Communications. It's very nice to meet you, Mr. Rhodes.
She sat and looked across the table to Dr. Astor, who still gazed at her hands. Dr. Murray nodded and said,
"And last but certainly not least, our executive liaison."
Alex gestured to Arthur, who stood smiling.
Arthur Sterrett, Orris board member, Migration Division liaison, head of Sterilex administration.
Garrett's stomach fell through all 21 floors and landed flat on the ground below them. He had pictured the Arthur Sterrett much differently. It never occurred to him that when the man introduced himself as Arthur, that it would be the famed inventor. Arthur sat, and Garrett stared at the man. Uneasy, Arthur spoke.
Did I say something that upset you?
Were you truly born in 3677?
Garrett immediately regretted asking the question, feeling childish in the formal setting, but Arthur laughed.
Yeah, I know it's hard to believe,
Arthur said. The smile dissolved from his face.
Going under isn't easy, though, Garrett. It is possible it does work, and it works damn well, but it's a tough experience. And I can only imagine how much harder it might be if you do a lot more than a couple 100 years. But I promise you will know everything I know before you take it for the first time. I promise that I'll prepare you to the best of my ability.
Dr. Murray chimed in.
Well, come on, Arthur, don't scare the guy off.
He was smiling.
He just accepted. No takebacks, right, Mr. Rhodes?
His smile was large and fixed, but Garrett sensed concern in the question.
No, sir. I understood from the beginning that using Sterilex could be...
Garrett searched for the right word.
Taxing.
Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad we're all on the same page. Now, each of us has a brief presentation to go through, and then we'd like to open for questions. Does that sound good to you?
Dr. Murray asked. Garrett smiled.
Excellent. Jack, do you want to get us started?
8. More than an hour passed before the last of the 5 specialists finished their presentations. The only ones that had not spoken besides Garrett himself were Dr. Murray and Arthur Sterrett.
Thank you very much, Olive,
Dr. Murray said.
Well, that leaves me and Mr. Sterrett. Art, do you have anything you want to present?
I will coach Mr. Rhodes and the other envoys in a private setting. There is really no reason to go into detail about the substance with people that will never have to experience it. It would be...
Arthur paused, searching for the correct phrasing.
A bit cruel. Just unnecessary, I think.
Dr. Murray looked like he had the wind knocked out of him.
Okay,
I'd like to be present,
Dr. Page said.
If this procedure is taxing, as Mr. Rhodes put it, I think I should be present as the head of psychology.
Dr. Murray raised his eyebrows and looked at Sterrett.
Of course, Christine,
Arthur said.
You are welcome to attend. I would like to keep the head count at these meetings as low as possible, though.
Dr. Page smiled and nodded.
Of course,
she said.
I guess it's my turn,
Dr. Murray exclaimed.
I don't have a specialty, as you understand, Mr. Rhodes. I'm in charge of this whole damned monster we call the Migration Division. As you may have also noticed, I'm trying to wash out the formality here. This division is very professional and is also a very formal business environment. But not for you, Garrett, and not for your colleagues. What we are asking you and yours in kind to do is phenomenal. The anxieties and stresses will be extraordinary. So I want you to know that when you walk into this building, there are no codes, no rituals, no expected formalities of any kind. You have no reason to be nervous when you walk through the doors downstairs. I'm not Dr. Murray, I'm Alex, or Al if you want. I don't care, and no one else does either. If you have a question about anything, you can ask anyone, and we'll get that question answered. I encourage you to go with first names here all around, and that's not limited to the Migration Division. If you run into the secretary of the whole damned Orris project, he expects you to call him Dan. I know, he told me this morning. The point is, Garrett, we don't want you to spend any energy trying to be the perfect puzzle piece here. This place is yours. We all work for you.
Everyone at the table nodded.
You can see this isn't some nonsense I'm making up on the spot. Everyone here already knows the envoys are the customer. Now can you tell me you understand what I've just explained to you? Tell me you really believe it.
Garrett understood. He also knew the right way to answer the question.
Yes, Al, I get it.
The largest smile since the meeting had begun spread across Dr. Murray's face.
Excellent. Now, do you have any questions for us?
Yes, I have 1,000 questions,
Garrett said.
but I don't know what any of them are yet.